All right, welcome back to Fight Talk, where we talk combat sports. My name is Austin Oman, and it is time to talk about what's next for each one of these guys. I went through the fight, and we just dropped a recap video on Monday, and today, here on Wednesday, we are dropping what's next for each guy. So obviously, we're going to talk for quite a while about the fascinating situation surrounding Poatan. What's next for Roundtree? Obviously for him, that face is pretty busted up, so he's going to take some time off. We'll talk about what should happen next for the women. Obviously, an interesting scenario with Amanda Nunes. It seems like coming back, probably. And then obviously we got to touch on Jose Aldo. And we got to touch on Wonder Boy, and see if I'm calling for them to retire or whether they should get back in there. Obviously, always a tough thing to talk about because you never know. And honestly, Aldo looks good. Wonder Boy, it's hard because he's not looking as good. But Aldo looks sharp yet, and so it's hard to call on a guy like that to retire. But stick around to see if we're doing that. First, obviously, the big news going on right now is Hurricane Milton. Just want to send out prayers for that, but also there's a UFC event in Tampa Bay on December 14th. It's a fight night. The UFC is going to Tampa Bay, and it seems like Tampa Bay is going to take quite the hit here as that thing rolls in. So, obviously, a lot of hotspot training places in Florida for the UFC. Obviously, the Miami events go crazy down there, but we go to Jacksonville and Tampa Bay here for a fight night. So just hoping that everything turns out okay there, and for our UFC fighters that are down there that they can evacuate or stay safe. But with that, let's talk a little Alex Pereira here. I want to jump into this. What a fascinating situation. We've currently got a guy in Alex Pereira who people are truly talking about fighting at 3 different divisions. There's talks about him going down to fight Drakus, and there's talks about him defending against Ankalaev, and then there's talks about him going up to heavyweight and fighting either Bones or Aspinall. That is quite the situation, and as I've said on this channel over the last couple of videos, I think that if he can go up and beat Aspinall or Jones, he's the GOAT. But this video isn't about that talk. This video is about what I think he should do next and what I think will happen next. So as we go to the UFC rankings, and we take a look at light heavyweight, you've got Alex Pereira. Obviously, he's the champion. And so you've got Drakus, people talking about him going down to 185. I'm against it. I just don't need to see it. I don't have any reason why I would want to see it. And also, I mean, it wouldn't prove anything, like, at all. Every other fight, if he were to take an Aspinall or a Jones or Ankalaev fight, that would prove a lot about this guy. Beating Drakus would do nothing. I mean, like, Drakus he's not quite Yuri, but he's a very unorthodox striker. And based off of what we've seen, being an unorthodox striker is not going to get it done. And most things aren't going to get it done against Pereira, but certainly that wild, flailing style that Drakus has doesn't seem like it's going to get it done. I could be totally wrong. Maybe it's just the thing that somebody needs to beat Alex is the crazy style that guy's got, jumping in and out. But I don't think I am. And I don't need to see Pereira cut weight to get down to 185. I mean, we know how big this guy is and how tough that was of a cut for him, even for those last couple of Izzy fights. It was quite obvious after that second Izzy fight that, okay, this guy needs to move up. And honestly, there's a reason we're talking about heavyweight. This guy is in a heavyweight type body. And so there's nothing I need to see at 185. There's the Adesanya thing. That doesn't feel like it needs to happen right now by any means. Obviously, nobody's talking about that because Adesanya just lost. And honestly, where it's kind of been left off, it benefits both guys. I mean, Adesanya, he made the comment before that this guy's going to be sitting in a bar telling people how he beat that guy one time. That's Israel Adesanya now. And obviously not quite. Like, Adesanya's still a star. But he's in a situation where him being able to say that he beat Alex Pereira is by far the biggest flex that he has on his resume. The fact that he could even fight this guy close in kickboxing and then in the UFC is a massive flex. Because Alex Pereira is bigger than Adesanya is, without a doubt, in this sport. And so, kind of where that left off is okay for him. He's the last person to beat him. He knocked him out. The guy who looks totally invincible right now. So it's okay for Adesanya. And for Pereira, I don't think he feels this like massive need to go down and knock him out and finish that rivalry. I mean, there's just so many things that are bigger and better at this point. And honestly, that fight, and I'm not saying Adesanya couldn't win it, but it almost wouldn't feel fair at this point because of the weight difference, for Pereira to go down, make that weight, and then just be a lot bigger than Adesanya by the time that fight happens. So I'm not dying for 185. You go up to 205, and there's a few names. Obviously, Prochazka, I'll pass. And then Ankalaev, Hill, Blachowicz, Rakic, which Rakic is fighting Ankalaev at, I think, 308. And then it's Ozdemir, Roundtree, and Ulberg is the only other name that I would consider. So we'll touch them all a bit. Yuri, don't need to see it. I don't think anybody needs to see it. Maybe in the future, but I mean, first I'll say this. Pereira should at least take off. I mean, for sure I would say until next spring, right? Half a year. But if he took off even a whole year, I'd be totally okay with that. Now it's hard because I think he's felt this too, that wow, I'm getting older. I think he's 37 now, and he understands that, and he's saying, well, I got to get these fights in, and it's true, and I understand why he feels that way. But I would be careful with that. For one, because he's a bigger guy, and these guys can fight till they're 42, 43 and do well, and I think he's in that situation where he could do that. But I would say take time off. Prochazka, I just don't need to see it. Ankalaev, I love it. And what I worry about with Ankalaev is, I think you give him the shot, but he's not like a volume puncher. He's a big-time puncher. But you almost feel like that Roundtree style of like volume punching, get in and get out, win by rounds, is the way to beat this guy, unless it's just like a Tom Aspinall, just like bigger, stronger type of deal. But Ankalaev's not that guy. And so if they fight, he should go to wrestling, which, by the way, people think since his name is Magomed Ankalaev, he just automatically wrestles a lot. He doesn't. But he's a good wrestler, and it would be absolutely the smart, respectable thing to do. Now, even if Pereira loses and gets out-wrestled by Ankalaev, I think he could still move up to heavyweight or fight Izzy, and everything would be okay, and no one would like even remember that or care that much about that loss, because it's almost just kind of, it's interesting for so many guys, they get really good, and it's like, well, can they beat the wrestler? And for Pereira, it's almost like, yeah, like maybe he can, but he probably can't, and that's okay. Like, he's just going to knock everybody else out. And if he gets out-wrestled, like, so what? He can go in there and fight another striker and knock him out. And I think that's really cool that the fan base is kind of wrapped around him in that way. So that's Ankalaev. 205 by far deserves it the most out of anyone. And by far has the best chance to beat him, I think, by wrestling. Then you've got Jamal Hill. I mean, have some just, like, what are we doing, Jamal Hill? I mean, have some shame. To get knocked out by a guy, brutally, on the biggest card of all time in the main event, do absolutely nothing since then, go to a fight, which is potentially fight of the year, and also potentially round of the year, round 4, and that fight could have been round of the year. Just an absolute exciting, just pounding Roundtree, head movement's insane, an absolute masterclass. Couldn't have been a more exciting fight, and an awesome finish. And this guy has the audacity to sit there, start yawning, and then look around to see if anybody actually cares, which the answer is no. Because we saw you get knocked out, and frankly, we don't need to see it again. And if there's anyone in this division that can beat Pereira, it's the crazy style of Prochazka, it's the wrestling of Ankalaev, it's the wrestling of Blachowicz, it's the leg kicks of Rakic, it's the striking of Ulberg. There's nothing that Jamal Hill brings different to the table. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, there's so many different things that these guys bring that are fun. And Jamal Hill's just that average striker. I mean, you just have to have some respect. And by the way, when we look at Jamal Hill and we go to UFC 300, I just want to show you what Jamal Hill has actually done. And many of you will be surprised to see, this guy actually hasn't done that much. Guy's 12-2 in the UFC. And you can see his little red face there. But let's just take a moment and see what he's done. He was gifted this title. So we have Blachowicz and Ulberg, right? And all these different guys in this division that bring something else. And how many of them did Jamal Hill beat? Not a one. Not a one. Guys, he lost to Paul Craig. He beat Johnny Walker. He beat Thiago Santos. And then he was handed this interim title shot. And without knocking out Glover Teixeira, beats him. And then he gets brutally knocked out by Alex Pereira. And so that is why I say, Jamal Hill, have some shame. I mean, just it is... I mean, you just don't see stuff like that. You don't. Like, the UFC, it's awesome, and it's a bunch of bad dudes, and it is a savage business that it is. And this guy has just tried to, he's just being someone that he's not. And frankly, I don't know what he is because he hasn't showed us yet. But Yuri and Alex's stare down was just so real, you know? And even Roundtree, looking at Pereira, it was just that's so real. That is just so real from these guys. We know who these guys are. Because Khalil, in the pre-fight press conferences, is telling us who he is. He's telling us that he's waited for this and how much this means to him. And he's telling us this after. And then you get a guy that's just so fake, like Jamal Hill. And, frankly, Jamal Hill, I mean, the stuff he did, trying to catch the bow from Pereira, it's just so cringy, man. I just don't understand how this guy, lives with himself. I mean, he's just the last guy that should get a title shot in this division again. There's nobody that needs to see that. He doesn't bring anything different to the table. And we have no reason to believe that he would even... I mean, frankly, he was scared in the octagon that night. He looked scared. He fought scared. And that's why Khalil Roundtree gets all the respect, because Khalil brought something different. He changed his fight style, because Khalil's typical fight style could not have hung with Pereira. So he changed it a bit. And he did hang with him. And he was an absolute warrior in there. So Jamal Hill should never get this title shot. Honestly, Jan Blachowicz, a lot of people forget this. This was the fight. By the way, people forget this. I had Jan Blachowicz beating Pereira when Pereira first moved up to 205. Now, that was a much different Pereira at 205. He's improved, like, a lot. But he could have easily lost that fight to Blachowicz. And I thought Blachowicz was the better fighter that night. So, I mean, it's just something to think about. I would push for that rematch. As a UFC fan, I would push for it. Because you talk about bad dudes, Jan Blachowicz is right up there. Rakic facing Ankalaev, so, like, winner of that fight is something to talk about. But obviously Rakic lost to Prochazka. Hopefully Ankalaev wins that fight. Like, every UFC championship fan should be cheering for Ankalaev. It's just better business. And then there's Roundtree and Ullberg. So Ullberg's fascinating, and I think he'll get this title shot. And he's the one guy in the division. The rest of the guys, it's like, we kind of know what we're going to get. Like, maybe they can beat Pereira. But, like, it doesn't necessarily mean they're actually better than Pereira, if that makes sense. Ullberg's the one guy where it's like, okay, this guy could be a serious star. And then Roundtree, I mean, obviously, out of everyone that Pereira's fought in this division, he deserves probably the rematch the most. Because he's fought the best version of Pereira. And he fought him really well. Much better than Prochazka or Jamal Hilden. So I'd be all in for that rematch. I mean, you could sell that rematch just based off showing a picture of Khalil's face after the fight and that round 4 and the way he was an absolute warrior in that. So I'm all in for that. And then heavyweight, the situation here, you've got a couple guys. John Jones, Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall's waiting out right now. Jones obviously fights Miocic at 309, which, by the way, just something to think about. What if Miocic wins? Right? What if Miocic wins? I think that might be like one of the craziest things to happen because nobody is expecting it and nobody's going to pick him come fight week. So if Miocic were to win, that would be quite interesting. When you talk about heavyweight, you've got John Jones fighting there. Let's say Jones wins. Feels like you have to make the Jones-Aspinall fight. It just does. Because Pereira's got so many options yet at 85 and 205. And you just don't have to push it. You just make Jones-Aspinall. And if Jones is done, then you can make Aspinall-Pereira. But since this, I'm not going to get into the whole heavyweight thing right now. But since this is about Pereira, I just want to say this. Let's fight someone else in the heavyweight division. Let's do it. Like anybody, honestly. Like a Sirogan, or a Volkov, or a Pavlovich. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be an awesome way to build it up? Heck, I mean, Derek Lewis. Like, wouldn't that be awesome? And, like, a very winnable fight for Pereira. If it was like Tuivasa or Lewis even. Or Rosenstrike, just to get in there. But like a Pavlovich, Volkov, Gane, I think would be awesome. Because Pereira's good, but man, like if it's, let's just say it's Aspinall, say Jones retires and they want Aspinall to be the guy, that is such a jump and so tough. Because Aspinall's been doing the same thing Pereira's been doing. But Aspinall's a heck of a lot bigger and a really, really talented wrestler. And a guy who isn't at the point in his career to say, yeah, I'll just stand and strike. Like for Aspinall, like if he can get a takedown, he's going to shoot the thing against Pereira. Pereira would need some work at heavyweight before fighting Aspinall. And so I think if Ankalaev wins, he can sit out and fight Ankalaev. But then I think fight a Pavlovich or a Volkov and then fight Aspinall. But there's still so many options. I mean, in the future, the Ankalaev rematch is awesome. Blachowicz rematch is pretty awesome. Ullberg coming up fast. There's just so many options, and that's what makes this guy so good. And it's fascinating the way he's revived this division. Just because when you get a champion like this, just the contenders in the division become so much more fun too. And that's kind of where we're at with Pereira is like, like Roundtree, Hill, Proshka, they're all fun, but like we're turning them into these like bigger than life characters because we need people like that to face Pereira. And it's really fun. And it's not fake. Like, he's just revived the light heavyweight division, honestly. And so that's where we're at. For Khalil Roundtree, what's next? Well, what's next for him is he just got surgery, and he's going to take a heck of a lot of time off. But after that, I think he's going to go back to running through this division and honestly have a lot of success doing that. And that's where I would put myself right up there again and say, let's get this guy some big fights. The Hill fight was supposed to happen right at 303. I would love to see that happen again. Personally, because I think Khalil would destroy him and it would make Hill a lot more quiet. But also just makes sense for the division. The other option would be like the Ankalaev Rakic loser, but even that, I can see both of those guys wanting to get back in sooner. I can see Hill waiting for a Roundtree rematch if he knows that the winner of that fight gets Pereira, or is like likely to get Pereira, if that makes sense. And so that's what I think should be next for Roundtree. Pennington and Pena. So for Juliana Pena, it's Nunes, they fight again, or Kayla Harrison. Obviously, Kayla Harrison showed a little weakness, not much, but she won. And so there's that three-way thing. And so it's basically the question of who's the final boss. Do you have Pena fight Kayla and then have the final boss be Nunes? Or do you have Pena fight Nunes? And I'm just assuming, and I think I'm making the correct assumption, that Nunes is coming back. I just think it's a guarantee. And honestly, I've said that since the day she retired. Or do you have Pena Nunes, third fight, and the winner faces Kayla? And I think Nunes is the final boss. I think she has to be. It's just so obvious. Like, obviously we know what Nunes has done in the sport, but Pena, I mean, either story is just so good. And either way, it's fine. But either story is so good. Pena beats Kayla, who just feels really invincible, really tough to beat, and then gets that third fight against Nunes. That's, and I'm not quick to say this, that's pay-per-view headline worthy and, like, really good stuff. Like, a really good fight. Something like a headline, a big-time pay-per-view. Not just something in Canada where Oliveira and Dariush, right, are on the undercard, but, like, big-time pay-per-view card in a big-time location that could take place in. Same with the opposite. Kayla runs through Pena, and now you've got Nunes, the GOAT of this division, and you've got this girl who was fighting in the PFL, comes to the UFC, dominates everyone in the UFC, and frankly, honestly, a lot of people would pick Kayla to win that fight, and I think I would too. And so you've got the next generation. It almost feels like a John Jones, Alex Pereira thing, where it's like, yeah, John Jones and Amanda Nunes, they've always been the GOATs, they've always been so good, but here comes Pereira, or here comes Kayla Harrison, and I think these people are a little bit better. That's how it feels for that fight. For Pennington, listen, I think there's plenty of options because of how she fought, for a chance for her to get back in there. I would hop in there if I were her. Try to make the Harrison fight if Nunes ends up fighting Pena right now, but otherwise any of those girls up top, Vieira, Dumont, Buena Silva, any of them, would be down for that. Even Alim Perez, I'm sure would be down for that. Okay, Aldo and Batista. Oh man, what a fight, right? No, not really. Batista, we go up to 145. So Batista moved up 2 spots, so he's ranked 9th in the division now. And you're really looking up in the divisions now that you beat Aldo. You're really looking up and saying, which, by the way, I don't think this does much for his career. Like, I think, for one, the fan base is, like, really frustrated with him right now after what happened, so it doesn't do much for his career in that aspect. But there's good things here, I think, that it can do. I would fight a guy like Rob Font, get another confidence fight. This division's pretty deep, like 1 through 8. I don't think he's ready for Song Yadong or Cejudo or Marlon Vera, Figgy, Santana, any of those guys. So I would fight down again. I'll just say Rob Font or Kyler Phillips for him. And then for Aldo, I'm calling him to retire. It's so tough. I talked about it on the first podcast. It's tough because he's really still really quick. But there's way too many guys in this division that can do what Batista did. And for his legacy's sake and all of that, it's just not great. By the way, takedown defense is still so good, but it's just not great to see him when Batista's taken half the fight with control time there. It's just tough. And it's not like he's winning these striking exchanges with Batista by a lot. It felt like he was because of the fans a little bit, but he really wasn't winning them by, like, a ton. And so that leaves us in a situation where it's like, listen, there's a lot of good strikers and a lot of good wrestlers in this division. He's a fun contender to watch. He's not a title contender anymore. So I think Jose Aldo should retire. But if he wants to make one more fight, which I think would be a decent idea, and make it happen in Rio, or honestly make it happen in a big U.S. card, to know it's an Aldo retirement fight would be really cool. Dominic Cruz, man. Make it happen. Say both of them are retiring after the fight. I think that'd be awesome. For Kevin Holland, what is next? This guy is such a wild card, so it's so hard to pick what's next for him. But really, any of these guys, 10 through 15, I'm not going to spend much time on that. Dolidze, again, it's not a huge win. Just went and lost, like a really bad fight against Anthony Smith. And then Kayla Harrison, obviously, we talked about. And with Kayla, I would have her fight Pena now and have Nunez as the final boss. I just want to touch on Cesar Almeida should get another good fight real quick against a striker. But then we'll end with Buckley and Thompson. So with Wonder Boy, I'll give him one more fight and say it's a retirement fight, but I need him to actually do that and not fight again. This division is way too deep. I mean, Buckley's good, but, like, it was Shavkat, now it's Buckley, and it's just going to keep going down. And this division at welterweight is just way too deep for Stephen Thompson to be anywhere near a title picture anytime soon and beat these guys. And so he's another one. MSG or somewhere big, Miami. Give him one last fun fight. Michael Venom Page. Wouldn't that be fun? Because MVP's kind of in that spot in his career. Not going to retire yet, doesn't seem like. But, like, fun fights. Fun fights. And Wonder Boy and MVP would be a sick fight. And then Buckley. How about Buckley and the way he's moving up right now in welterweight? And it's time for him to fight up in the rankings here. Big time. He's going to be calling out some big time names. And honestly, this isn't the fight maybe that makes the most sense for his opponent here. But I want to see Kamaru Usman because I think that would be a sick fight, whether it's wrestling or striking. That would be an awesome, awesome fight. And I just want to see Usman back so bad. But honestly, I think this guy will take a fight against anyone. And if him and Bilal fought, I would probably pick Buckley because of where we're at in the division. Honestly, if there's anyone that has a chance against Shavkat, I think it's someone with the mentality of Buckley. Like, Buckley just goes forward so much and uses his, that amazing physicality that he has to do well. So honestly, for this guy, fight anyone. Fight anyone who will say yes. If that's Shavkat, do it. If it's Leon, do it. If it's any of these guys, do it. But he's kind of a matchup nightmare for a lot of these guys because of his style. But I want to see Kamaru Usman next for him. So that is that. That's what's next for each guy. So many options for Pereira. And honestly, for the rest of these people, but for that women's thing, Pena, Kayla Nunez, that is a lot of fun to talk about. And a lot of good things are going to happen in the Bantamweight division. By the way, after that Pennington fight against, who was it, Bueno Silva, on the Strickland card, people are like, get rid of the division. This is terrible. And now this is a lot of fun. Now we've got Pena with the title again, and she's so much fun. And you've got Kayla's in the UFC now, and Nunez is thinking about coming back. So this went from really bad to really good in a hurry. And a lot of good things are happening there in this division. Pretty soon, I'm going to come out with the B-Bowl Better BF preview for this Saturday. Cannot wait for that in Saudi Arabia. That is such a good fight. It's 50-50 all the way. But that is all I got for now. I am Austin Ullman, and I will see you next time.